It's an amazing crowd. Okay, I just want to make sure my slides are up for the magic. All right, perfect. So Daniel started us off nicely. There's this report 95% of AI pilots are failing. Right? That's a staggering figure, right? That should cause you some pause. But then what about the 5% of projects that are working? What are they doing that's different? So that's the question I want to take on today. Now, we're going to start by just reviewing a little bit about what is the value that's in there in using AI. Then we'll spend a little bit of time on the evolving technical capabilities that are coming out of AI. And finally, I want to end with some good practical lessons that we can all take away so that way our AI projects can succeed. Now, as background, I'm chief evangelist at Contextual. I work for a San Francisco based startup, but I too live here in the Midwest. I'm over in Bloomington, Illinois. Started off my data science career out here. I worked at places like State Farm, Caterpillar, so I know the vibe here. Been inside a Caterpillar manufacturing plant as well. And then, as Daniel mentioned, I have a lot of fun on the sides. I like to make silly videos about data science and AI. And so you can find me all over social media. Once you see me at Logistics, it's over. You'll find me everywhere around there. All right, so let's go and talk about AI and the impact of AI. We know that AI is going to be a humongous prize. Right? There's a lot of value that's put up into that. And if we look around today, we can already see the way the industry is going. There's clear companies that are leading it and some that are laggards. But if we also look closer to home, we can already see that about 11% of our children are lying about their use of AI. So JP Morgan recently shared how much money they were saving by using AI, right? An amazing amount, $2 billion. But the nice thing that they actually shared, where most companies haven't really publicly shared as much, is they shared how much they've spent to save that, right? And you can see here that they've spent about $2 billion to save about $2 billion. Now, if you talk to some other places, some other consulting organizations like Deloitte will tell you that on average, their users are seeing something like a return of 2 to 3 years for their AI investments. The Wharton School also did a similar study, found something in the similar range. So I kind of took that number, used my little ChatGPT skills, and kind of came up with this, where we could see what the payback is for AI versus other technologies. Right? So some of us have been around to remember like life before the cloud, digital transformations. All of these things were projects that we worked on for many years like that. So there's a lot of value in pursuing AI generally, it looks like. But I want to move on now and talk about where the capabilities are going for AI. And this is going to be much more forward-looking. But I need everybody to remember the kind of the basics of AI here. Like, as fancy as it is, at the end of the day, at the bottom of these technologies, they're trying to just predict that next word. And for anybody that's a practitioner a little bit, I always say, hey, go out and train your own model to do this. Now, some folks like to go use Shakespeare or some startup literature. I'm a Midwesterner guy. I use Homer Simpson when I train my models to see how they learn. And so literally you can take the scripts from The Simpsons. I've shared repos for this, and you can train the same type of transformer models that you see in ChatGPT. And what you learn is that as you give it more data, more compute, Homer becomes much more intelligible like that. Now, of course, the models that we use today are scaled way more than this. It's something on the order of 15 trillion tokens so they could see, so they can kind of be able to tell stories like this. Now, to give you a sense of 15 trillion tokens, imagine you went out, you grabbed one of the books, you sat outside and you read. If you read for an hour, if you read, let's just say you read all day, all night, let's say you read for 10 years continuously. If you read for 10 years continuously, that would be about 1 billion tokens. There we go. 1 billion words. Now, you can do the math there. Like a billion to a trillion is still a huge amount of information. And so it gives you a sense of like just how vast the amount of information these LMs are exposed to. We just cannot comprehend that piece there. Come on. There we go. Now, besides being able to do this, these AIs, we've also been able to control and add new capabilities over time. So the initial ones were good storytellers, but then we were able to tell them, hey, we want you to follow instructions. If I ask you to do something, I want you to do it. Then we said, hey, I want you to be helpful and not harmful. And this is one of the reasons ChatGPT blew up, is because it was one of the first models that was trained in such a way. In the last year, what we've done is we've added new reasoning capabilities to the models. So now they can solve these complicated problems. They can solve these like math proofs that are crazy hard like that. And so there's a lot of simple tasks. We're all aware of all the simple things. We do this all the time with ChatGPT. But what I want you to all be aware of and what's coming is we're able to solve much more complicated tasks nowadays with models. When I first got into AI and machine learning, Andrew Ng, one of the kind of the exemplars of the field, told everybody, hey, if you want to know a good use case, find something that takes just a snap of a finger for somebody to do. So that used to be things like image classification, text classification, is something spam or not, right? Like a snap of a finger. But the models nowadays are so much better. They can do tasks now that takes us minutes, even hours to do. And here's the thing about the graph is, take a look. It's not slowing down at all. It's continuing to expand. And so this is going to be a crazy next couple of years, because I don't see any reason why these models are not going to be able to continue to do this. They're going to be able to continue to tackle more and more advanced tasks. Now, a recent benchmark that OpenAI put out on this is called GDP Valve. So the gross domestic product, Valve. What they wanted to do is, let's look at our GDP. Let's look at how our economy makes money. Let's look at the different jobs there are and what are the tasks they do. Let's build a representative set of tasks across there. And so that's what they did. They built a representative set of tasks, and then they asked AI to do these tasks. And what they found out is for these tasks on average, the latest models are very close to expert level. Right? So this should cause you pause for thinking about all the things that are happening here in our economy. Many of these things AI can do. And again, I'm saying here, these are tasks. These are like certain little things to do. It's very different than a job, and we have lots of other pieces we do. But still, there's lots of pieces of things that we do that the AI can do very well like that. And so, these are really astonishing pieces of things we've built, but like, how are we going to harness them? So let's talk about how we harness them for writing legal briefs. So I want to tell you a story about kind of a lawyer that was working on a legal brief. They wanted to head out to their house out in the Hamptons. This was based in New York. They were working for an airline company. And they were trying to get that legal brief done on a Friday evening, right? Wanting to head out. They used ChatGPT as their tool. And they've used ChatGPT before. It's very useful to find the latest legal cases. Sometimes it would give them legal cases that they hadn't seen before. So they were like, this is great. It's a tool that helps me beyond my typical Lexis Westlaw like that. So they grabbed a bunch of those cases, put it in their brief, and sent it off to the judge. But what they didn't realize is that when they used ChatGPT, sometimes some of those cases were actually made up, right? Hopefully at this point, all of us are kind of quite aware of this issue. And we've seen it happen to many lawyers over time when they use these tools, that these models, because they're trained to tell stories, because they're trained to be helpful to us, will often make these hallucinations. They will tell us things that we want to hear that aren't true like that. And this hasn't gone away. Even if you use something like GPT-5 today and you ask it questions about geography, or you ask it to make a diagram, it'll get these things wrong as well. They're far from perfect even today. And so this is where I want us to all pause and remember there's lots of issues with these as well. So Cursor, for example, one of the code completion tools out there used AI as its customer service bot. And the AI made up a new policy that said only one person could use its tool at a time. And people were like, wait a minute, this isn't the product I paid for. A bunch of people like went out and canceled their subscription, and it really caused a reputational hit because their AI customer service bot made up an entirely new policy. There's also lots of concerns about the copyright issues with the data that comes into these models and out of these models as well. And then finally, when you start putting these models out there, just like if your employee says, hey, this is our store policy for this, well, if your chatbot says this is the policy for this, the courts are going to say, well, hey, it's no different than employee. You have to back that up. And so these are all the things we have to consider about what can kind of go wrong with it. And right, I love this analogy of thinking of AIs as brilliant interns, right? They're super smart. They can do amazing things in one way, but they can just do the stupidest things, right, at the same time as well. So now that we know this, let's go back and figure out what was in that 5%. What were the things that made those AI projects succeed? It was around usability, making sure it was very effortless for users to be able to use this. They didn't have to go back and forth between 3 applications. There was utility in what they were doing. It tied into the rest of their workflows as well. Value. The tools tied directly to what was useful for the business. This wasn't a science project that was done. And the last piece here was sustainability. There was leadership and change management that helped this along. Now, one of the things I always like to remind people when talking about these is that bottom piece, the practical context. What happens often when we want to, or let me rephrase this. I think one of the best rules of thumb I have for figuring out what a good use case is what is the cost of a mistake for a project? This is why you see AI so useful in things like writing code, because the cost of the AI making a mistake is very small. The developers will look over, there's tests that can go into play. While you're trying to put that into like healthcare where somebody's life's in danger, right? You've got to have a human in the loop or something because that cost of that mistake is so high. So now let's get to some of the practical lessons that we can take from that 5% for exactly how you should start building your AI projects. And so this was in the report, but it's also stuff that I feel is very true from my own personal experience kind of working in the space. And the first is the bar for user experience. And this isn't just building a fancy UI. This is about having an experience so when customers go and use the application and they come back an hour later or a day later, they don't have to restart from everything. That the application remembers what they've trained it before. If you've spent time interacting with it, it should remember that. It should learn from what you've already done with it before. You don't want to have to reteach that same application every time. Next is, especially in an enterprise setting, and I think Daniel kind of hinted this before with talking about integrations, is the tools that you make have to fit within the enterprise workflows. Enterprises already have lots of different systems that they interconnect with. Having integrations to all those is key. Expecting somebody to like grab a file from one project, put it into your application, do something, and then take that file and drag it into something else, that's a non-starter. Like you need to have everything work and build in that workflow as well. Now, the third thing here is the build process. And this is usually the difference between teams that are building internally within a company versus if you buy an external vendor. And what happens is a team that's building internally often is really focused on like, what are the problem we're trying to solve with the AI? But they might not consider compliance, security issues, privacy issues in the design of what they're building. So later then, when it comes up, when you want to actually move that little demo that they built to production, now all of a sudden you're like, oh, like we have to add all the security pieces, we have to add the privacy pieces, and you're like bolting that on later, which is much harder to do. So incorporating those things in the beginning makes a big difference. The fourth is the ROI focus. We need to use AI that generates value in the enterprise. Often we'll come to great conferences like this, New York, San Francisco. We'll see the latest technologies that these companies put out, right? I've built a new world model that does video recognition or something. That's great, but like my business spends most of its time like with paper documents processing them. Like I don't need a video model to do things. It makes more sense to work on those back office processes. And that's again the focus you need to have is like where's actually the value going to be for your organization versus just what looks cool and what the executives are impressed by at the latest conference. And speaking of executives, you got to have that sponsorship. I mean, I remember that from my time when I was working inside enterprises where I learned very quickly, like if you don't have a VP on your project, it's not going to go very far because inevitably you're going to run into IT, you're going to run into data governance, you're going to run into compliance, and you're going to have to go through a ton of paperwork and you need a VP to help push that through in there. But to get that VP, you also need to make sure your project is really aligned with some KPI, some business metrics, some value that's going to bring with them. But having that executive alignment is crucial as well. And the last piece is, and this is why I see lots of enterprises really focusing on a few AI efforts instead of like 1,000 pieces at once, is it's not easy for people to absorb inside the company. Most of us that are here are excited about the technology. We want to learn about it, but that's far from normal inside of our enterprises. Like, right? Most people are there to make money. They're not there to learn about AI. And so you need to have incentives into place to have them. You have to have time for training to absorb, for them to absorb all of these pieces like that. And this is why you could only push so much AI at a time, and you have to be careful about that. And that change management, I think, is something that's really under talked about in terms of what it's effective to get an effective AI project through there. Now, I think one of the key things I've learned is that leadership pays off. This was a BCG study, but having folks in leadership that invest in the project, it's clear that that pays off much more. It's also the difference between when we looked at those laggard companies versus the leadership companies. And one easy way for me to tell, are companies investing, are they doing this, is when I look at their strategies. Are companies putting together an AI strategy? Are they thinking about this? Is their leadership vested in this? You don't have to have this exact AI strategy. This is just a placeholder to kind of remind people to think the organizations need to be thinking and planning about that in order for you to be able to succeed in that way. All right. So AI is amazing. There's a lot of amazing tools. I'm around all day today to be able to talk about it, whether it's the technical side, whether it's the practical side here. But to get these things into that 5%, to get your projects to really succeed inside of an enterprise, you still need that human and that leadership to get that stuff done. All right. Thank you all.